The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty streets of New Pittsburgh Colony. Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he climbed out of the deep mining shaft. His younger brother Danny was already waiting at the surface, covered in the same red dust that coated everything on this planet. "Another good haul today," Danny said, pointing to the containers full of rare crystals they had pulled from the ground. "These blue ones are worth more than gold back on Earth." Jake nodded and looked around at their small mining town. 200 families called this place home. They'd all come here 5 years ago, hoping to build something better than what they left behind. The planet was harsh, but it was theirs. At least it had been theirs until last week. The Zephyrian ships had appeared in the sky like dark clouds. 3 massive vessels, each one bigger than their entire town. The aliens inside had purple skin and 3 yellow eyes that never seemed to blink. They wore metal suits that made them look even more frightening. Commander Vextel had been the first to step off their ship. He was taller than any human, with scars across his face that told stories of many battles. When he spoke, his voice sounded like grinding metal. "This planet now belongs to the Zephyrian Empire," he had announced to the gathered colonists. "You have 3 choices. Leave immediately, become our workers, resist and die." Most of the families had chosen to leave. They packed their things and boarded the transport ships that came to take them away. Some others, like Colony Administrator Roger Hayes, had quickly agreed to work for the aliens. They hoped that cooperation would keep them safe, but Jake and Danny Morrison had made a different choice. This planet held the graves of their parents who had died in the first year of settlement. Their mother Sarah had always said that home was not just a place you lived, but a place you were willing to fight for. "We are not leaving," Jake had told Commander Vexel that first day. "This is our home," the alien commander had laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Foolish humans. You will learn." Now, 1 week later, Jake and Danny were still here. So were about 30 other colonists who had refused to give up their home. Pete Williams, the colony's former security chief, had organized them into small groups. Lisa Carter, who used to run the medical center, now helped treat their wounds. After each fight, the resistance had been busy. They knew every tunnel and cave on this planet. They knew where the aliens kept their supplies and how they moved their patrols. Most importantly, they knew that the Zephyrians were not as smart as they thought they were. 3 days ago, Jake had used his old skills from his time in Earth Fleet communications to hack into their computer systems. The aliens never imagined that a simple miner might know about advanced electronics. While they were looking for him in the mountains, Jake was sitting in an abandoned mine shaft, downloading their patrol schedules and supply routes. "The big supply depot is only lightly guarded tonight," Jake told the group as they gathered in their hidden base. The base was an old mining cave that the aliens had not found yet. "If we hit it hard and fast, we can destroy enough equipment to slow them down for weeks." Pete Williams studied the map Jake had drawn. "What about their communications tower? If we take that out, they cannot call for help." "Lisa and I can handle that," Danny volunteered. "We know the back way through the crystal caves," Lisa Carter checked her medical supplies. "I have enough bandages and medicine for whatever happens, but we need to be careful. The aliens are getting angrier each time we hit them." Jake looked around at the faces of his friends and neighbors. They were tired and scared, but they were not giving up. These people had come to this planet to build new lives, and they were willing to fight to keep them. "Remember what my mother always said," Jake told them. "We are not just fighting for dirt and rocks. We are fighting for the right to choose our own future." That night, the resistance struck again. Jake and Pete took for others to the supply depot. They moved through the darkness like shadows, using the natural cover of the rocky terrain. The Zephyrian guards were lazy and overconfident. They never expected humans to be so bold. The depot held food, weapons, and communication equipment. Jake set charges on the main building while Pete and the others kept watch. The explosion lit up the night sky and could be seen from their hidden base. At the same time, Danny and Lisa reached the communications tower. It stood on a hill overlooking the town, sending signals to the Zephyrian ships in orbit. Lisa kept watch while Danny climbed the tower and planted explosives at its base. The tower fell with a crash that shook the ground. For the first time since the aliens arrived, New Pittsburgh was quiet. No alien voices came from their speakers. Orders were being sent to their patrols. But Jake knew their success would not last long.
The aliens would be very angry now.
They would start looking harder
for the resistance fighters, and they would not be merciful when they found them. Commander Vextel proved Jake right the very next morning. The alien commander gathered all the remaining colonists in the town square. His 3 eyes burned with rage as he looked at the smoking ruins of his depot and communications tower. "Someone among you is helping these terrorists," he announced, his metal voice echoing off the buildings. "Tell me who they are, and I will be merciful. Keep silent, and you will all suffer." Roger Hayes stepped forward from the crowd. His face was pale and his hands were shaking. Jake watched from his hiding place in the old church bell tower and felt his heart sink. He could see the fear in Hayes' eyes, and he knew what was coming. "Know where they are hiding," Hayes said in a voice barely above a whisper. "I can take you to them." Jake wanted to run back to warn the others, but it was too late. Zephyrian soldiers were already surrounding the old mining cave. Danny was caught, trying to escape through the back entrance. Pete Williams was captured while trying to hold them off so others could get away. Jake tried to reach his brother, but more soldiers appeared from behind the rocks. An energy weapon struck him in the back, and he fell to the ground. His muscles would not obey him. He could not move, could not fight, could not run. The last thing Jake saw before darkness took him was Commander Vextel standing over him, smiling with satisfaction. Jake Morrison woke up in a cold metal cell. His head felt like it had been hit with a hammer, and his arms were chained to the wall behind him. The room was small and dark, with only a thin line of purple light coming from under the door. He could hear voices in the hallway outside, Zephyrian voices, speaking in their harsh language that sounded like breaking metal. Jake had learned some of their words during his time hacking their computers. He knew they were talking about him and Danny. The door opened with a loud clang. Commander Vextel walked in, followed by 2 guards. The alien commander looked even more frightening up close. His purple skin had dark veins running through it, and his 3 yellow eyes moved independently as they studied Jake. "The famous Jake Morrison," Vexel said in English. His accent made every word sound threatening. The human who thought he could fight the Zephyrian Empire with mining tools and stolen information? Jake said nothing. He would not give this alien the satisfaction of seeing his fear. "Your brother is in the cell next to you," Vexel continued. "He has been asking about you. Such touching loyalty between humans. It will make what comes next even more... educational." The commander turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "Rest well, human. Tomorrow, you will help me teach your species an important lesson about the price of resistance." After the aliens left, Jake heard a familiar voice through the wall. Jake, are you there? Danny?" Jake pressed his ear to the cold metal. "Are you hurt? Just some bruises, you?" "I am okay." Jake wished he could see his brother, could tell him that everything would be fine, but they both knew that was not true. "Danny, listen to me. Whatever they do tomorrow, do not give them the satisfaction of breaking down. Mom and Dad would want us to face this with courage." "I know, brother. I am not afraid." But Jake could hear the tremor in Danny's voice. His little brother was trying to be brave, just like he had always done since they were children. Danny had always looked up to Jake, had always followed him into every adventure and trouble. Now Jake had led him into something they might not survive. The next morning, the guards came for both brothers. They were dragged through the corridors of the Zephyrian ship, past rooms full of alien technology and weapons. Jake tried to memorize the layout, hoping they might find a way to escape. But there were too many guards, and his chains were too heavy. They were brought to a large room filled with cameras and recording equipment. Jake realized this was a broadcast studio. Banks of screens showed images from across human space, Earth, the Mars colonies, the mining stations in the asteroid belt. Every human settlement was represented here. Commander Vextel stood at the center of it all like a director preparing for a show. He wore his best uniform, with medals and decorations that probably represented planets he had conquered and species he had destroyed. "Today, the galaxy will witness the consequences of defying the Zephyrian Empire," he announced to his crew. "Every human colony will see what happens to those who choose resistance over surrender." Meanwhile, far away on Earth, Admiral Kate Sullivan sat in the command center of Terra Defense. She had been tracking the Zephyrian advance for months, watching as they took one human colony after another. Most surrendered without a fight. The few that resisted were crushed quickly and quietly. But New Pittsburgh had been different. Resistance there had lasted longer than anyone expected. Reports of their attacks on Zephyrian forces had spread to other colonies, inspiring hope where there had been only fear. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian fleet," reported Lieutenant Commander Ben Torres from his communication station. "They are requesting access to our broadcast networks." Admiral Sullivan frowned. "For what purpose?"
They
"Say they want to make an announcement to all human colonies. It's something about the fate of rebels." Dr. Alex Murphy looked up from his computer terminal. He was the head of the Experimental Weapons Division, a thin man with worried eyes who rarely left his laboratory. "Kate, this could be bad. They have captured the resistance leaders from New Pittsburgh." "Put it through to all networks," Admiral Sullivan ordered. "But record everything. I want to know exactly what these aliens are planning." Back on the Zephyrian ship, the broadcast was beginning. Commander Vexel stood before the cameras, his 3 eyes glowing with satisfaction. Behind him, Jake and Danny Morrison were chained to metal posts, their faces bloody but unbroken. "Humans of the galaxy," Vexel began, his voice carrying. "Across space, to millions of homes and settlements, you have been told lies about the Zephyrian Empire. You have been told that resistance is possible, that your primitive species can fight against our advanced civilization." The camera focused. On the 2 brothers, Jake lifted his head and looked directly into the lens. Even through his injuries, his eyes burned with defiance. "Today, I will show you the truth," Vexel continued. "These 2 criminals destroyed Zephyrian property and killed Zephyrian soldiers. They led others into foolish acts of terrorism against the rightful authority of this sector." On Earth, President Linda Davis watched the broadcast from her office. Her advisors sat around the table in grim silence. They all knew what was coming, but they were powerless to stop it. "Get me the Global Defense Council," President Davis ordered. "Emergency session." Now, Dr. Murphy was already on his phone, speaking. In urgent whispers to someone at his laboratory, Admiral Sullivan noticed his strange behavior, but said nothing. There would be time for questions later. On the broadcast, Commander Vextal was speaking directly to the camera now. "Let this be a lesson to all humans. Zephyrian Empire brings order to chaos, civilization to barbarism. Those who accept our rule will prosper. Those who resist will face the consequences." He gestured to his guards, who brought forward 2 strange devices. They looked like metal collars with glowing crystals attached. Jake had seen similar technology in the Zephyrian computer files he had stolen. These were neural disruptors, weapons designed to cause maximum pain before death. "The execution of these terrorists will be slow," Vexel announced. "Their suffering will be broadcast to every human world so that all may see the price of defiance." Jake and Danny exchanged one last look. In that moment, Jake saw not fear in his brother's eyes, but something else. Pride. Determination. The same look their mother had worn when she spoke about fighting for what was right. When the guards approached with the neural disruptors, Jake spoke for the first time since being captured. His voice was clear and strong, carrying across the galaxy to every human who was watching. "You think killing us ends this?" he said, looking straight at Commander Vextal. "You do not understand what you have started." Donnie lifted his chin. Defiantly. "Humans do not stay down. We get back up, and we hit back harder." Commander Vextel smiled coldly. Brave words from a dead man. He personally attached the first neural disruptor to Jake's neck, then moved to Danny. "Let us see how brave you are when the pain begins." The devices activated with a soft humming sound. But instead of screaming, the Morrison brothers began to sing. It was an old Earth song their mother had taught them, about home and freedom, and never giving up. Their voices carried across the galaxy, and in that moment, every human watching understood that something had changed. The Zephyrians could kill them, but they could not break them. They could not take away what made them human. The neural disruptors hummed with deadly energy as they pressed against the necks of the Morrison brothers. Jake could feel the device warming against his skin, preparing to send waves of agony through his nervous system. But he kept singing, his voice joining with Danny's in the old song their mother had loved. "Commander?" Vexta watched with growing irritation. He had expected screaming, begging, tears of terror. Instead, these humans were singing about their home planet, about blue skies and green fields they would never see again. Their voices were strong and clear, carrying across the galaxy to every human settlement. "Activate the devices," Vextal ordered his technician. "Full power." The Zephyrian technician, a younger alien with darker purple skin, hesitated. "Commander, full power will cause immediate brain death. The execution is supposed to last 10 minutes for maximum psychological impact." "I said full power," Vexel snapped. "These humans mock us with their defiance. End this now." But the technician's delay had given Jake enough time to do something the aliens had not expected. Hidden in his boot was a small device he had built during his days as a communications specialist. It looked like a simple biomonitor, the kind miners use to track their health in dangerous shafts. But Jake had modified it with quantum encryption technology stolen from the Zephyrian computers as the neural disruptor began its deadly work. Jake's biomonitor detected the specific pattern of neural activity that meant death was coming. That moment transmitted a coded signal through the Zephyrian communication network, a signal that would activate something Jake had planted deep in their systems weeks ago. The pain hit Jake like a bolt of lightning. Every nerve in his body screamed as the alien device sent waves of agony through his brain. But even through the torture, he managed to smile. The signal had been sent. Now it was up to the people watching to make his death mean something. Danny felt the same terrible pain, but he kept his eyes on his brother. If Jake could be brave, so could he. They had always faced everything together, from childhood adventures to the hard work of building a new life on this planet. They would face death the same way. On Earth, Admiral Kate Sullivan watched the execution with tears in her eyes. The Morrison brothers were dying slowly, their bodies convulsing as the alien devices destroyed their nervous systems. But they never begged, they never broke. Even as life left their eyes, they looked proud. "Those brave boys," whispered Lieutenant Commander Ben Torres.
"Aye."
"They are showing the whole galaxy what humans are made of." Dr. Alex Murphy was not watching the screen. He was typing frantically on his computer, his fingers flying over the keyboard. Strange codes and numbers filled his monitor, and beads of sweat ran down his face despite the cool air in the command center. "Alex, what are you doing?" Admiral Sullivan asked. "Something I hoped we would never have to use," Dr. Murphy replied. Without looking up, Jake Morrison was smarter than the aliens knew. Before he was captured, he uploaded a virus into their network. A virus programmed to activate when his biosigns indicated death. Admiral Sullivan leaned closer to Murphy's. "Screen what kind of virus?" "The kind that drops their shields and disables their weapon systems." Jake turned their own network against them. Murphy's voice was grim. "He also sent us their exact coordinates and fleet positions. Everything we need for a precision strike." On the broadcast, Jake Morrison's voice had grown weak, but he was still trying to speak. His words came out broken and painful, but every human watching could understand them. "We are afraid double quotes," Jake whispered. "Earth members children." Danny tried to reach for his brother's hand, but the chains held him back. "Jake, I love you, brother. Love you too. Danny. Tell Mom and Dad we kept promise." Commander Vextal grew tired of waiting. He drew his personal weapon, a sleek energy pistol that could vaporize a human in seconds. Enough of this pathetic display. Die with some dignity. But before he could fire, something strange happened. The lights in the broadcast studio began to flicker. Computer screens showed error messages in the Zephyrian language. Alarms started sounding throughout the ship. "Commander?" called a technician from Malay. Across the room, We are losing power to the weapon systems. The shields are failing. Something is wrong with the network. Vextel spun around, his three eyes wide with confusion. What do you mean something is wrong? All our systems are shutting down. Communications, navigation, life support. Everything is failing at once. Jake Morrison managed to lift his head one last time. Through the pain and approaching darkness, he smiled at Commander Vextel. I told you, ... you do not understand. ... double quotes with those words. Jake Morrison died. The biomonitor in his boot sent its final signal, confirming his death. 2 systems across human space. Danny Morrison followed his brother moments later, their hands almost touching despite the chains that held them. The broadcast continued for a few more minutes as the Zephyrian crew tried to understand what was happening to their ship. But viewers across the galaxy could see the panic in their movements, fear in their three-eyed faces as their advanced technology failed them. On Earth, President Linda Davis had arrived at the command center just in time to see the execution. Her face was pale with rage and grief, but her voice was steady when she spoke. Admiral Sullivan, do we have the capability to respond to this attack on our people? Admiral Sullivan looked at Dr. Murphy, who nodded grimly. Yes, Madam President. Dr. Murphy has been working on something called the Righteous Fury Project. Long-range kinetic bombardment satellites positioned throughout human space. Kinetic bombardment? President Davis asked. Tungsten rods fired at significant fractions of light speed, Dr. Murphy explained. They carry the kinetic energy of nuclear weapons, but with pinpoint accuracy. We can hit specific targets across interstellar distances. President Davis thought of the 2 young men who had just died for the crime of defending their home. Thought of their parents, buried on a distant planet that was now under alien occupation. She thought of every human colony living in fear of Zephyrian conquest. How long until the weapons are in position? She asked. Dr. Murphy checked his computer. The satellites are already in position. We have been preparing for this possibility for years. We can fire on your command. And how long until the projectiles reach their targets? Approximately 8 minutes, Madam President. President Davis looked at the screen, where Commander Vextel was shouting orders at his panicking crew. The alien who had just tortured 2 innocent men to death was about to learn that humanity was not as helpless as he believed. Target every Zephyrian military installation in the system, President Davis ordered. Jake and Danny Morrison died as heroes. Let their deaths be the spark that lights the fire of human resistance. Admiral Sullivan began entering the targeting commands. Righteous Fury satellites are locking onto targets. Firing sequence initiated. Cross-human space. Hidden satellites that had been disguised as communication relays or mining equipment began to move. They turned toward the new Pittsburgh system, their long-range sensors, locking onto the Zephyrian fleet that had just broadcast the execution of 2 human brothers. The countdown began. In 8 minutes, the aliens would learn that humanity had been preparing for this war long before the first Defarian ship had appeared in human space. In 8 minutes, Jake and Danny Morrison would have their revenge. The signal from Jake Morrison's biomonitor traveled through space at the speed of light, carrying with it a quantum virus that had been waiting in the Zephyrian networks for weeks. What the aliens did not know was that Jake had been much more than a simple miner before coming to New Pittsburgh. He had been one of Earthfleet's top communications specialists, trained in electronic warfare and cyber attacks. During the Resistance's early raids, Jake had done more than just steal patrol, schedules, and supply routes. He had planted a sophisticated virus deep in the Zephyrian computer systems. The virus was designed to stay hidden, copying itself through their networks and waiting for one specific signal, the unique biometric pattern that would be transmitted when Jake Morrison died. Now that signal had been received, and the virus began to wake up. On the Zephyrian command ship, technicians stared in confusion at their control panels. Error messages appeared faster than they could read them. Systems that had worked perfectly for years suddenly began to malfunction. The ship's artificial intelligence, which controlled everything from weapons to life support, started receiving conflicting orders from its own programming. Vextel called the chief technician, his purple skin now pale with fear. The entire network is compromised. Something is rewriting our command codes. Vextel stormed over to the control station. What do you mean rewriting? That is impossible. Human technology is centuries behind ours. Sir, I am reading massive data corruption across all systems. Our weapons are offline. The shields are failing. Even the navigation computers are giving false readings. On other Zephyrian ships throughout the system, the same chaos was spreading. The virus moved from ship to ship through their communication links, turning their own advanced technology against them. What had seemed like their greatest advantage, a fully networked fleet that could coordinate perfectly, had become their IDAPS. Greatest weakness, Captain Zechtel of the destroyer Voidfang watched his bridge crew struggle with failing systems. How is this possible? We scanned every human device before allowing them on our ships. There was nothing that could cause this level of damage. His communications officer looked up with 3 wide eyes. Captain, I think the virus came from inside our own network. It has been hiding in our systems, learning our protocols, and preparing for this moment. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Alex Murphy was watching his screens with grim satisfaction. For 10 years, he had been working on humanity's secret defense project. The Righteous Fury system was born from a simple but terrifying idea. If humanity could not match alien technology ship to ship, they would find another way to fight. The solution had been kinetic bombardment satellites. Hidden throughout human space and disguised as innocent communication relays or mining equipment. Each satellite carried a dozen tungsten rods, each rod weighing several tons and capable of being accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. The targeting system is locked onto all Zephyrian vessels, Dr. Murphy reported to President Davis and Admiral Sullivan. We have clear shots at their entire fleet. The virus Jake Morrison planted has disabled their defensive systems. President Davis looked at the tactical display showing the positions of enemy ships. Each red dot represented a Zephyrian vessel, and each blue dot was one of humanity's hidden weapons. There were more blue dots than anyone had expected. Many satellites do we have in position? She asked. 47 in the New Pittsburgh system alone, Dr. Murphy answered. Over 300 throughout human space. We've been preparing for this day since the first reports of alien expansion reached Earth. Admiral Sullivan studied the tactical information. The aliens have been busy conquering colonies and showing off their superior technology. They never thought to look for weapons that were already in place. Dr. Murphy nodded. The beautiful thing about kinetic weapons is their simplicity. No exotic energy sources, no complex targeting systems, just mass times velocity equals devastation. Even if they detect the tungsten rods coming, they cannot stop them without their shields and point defense systems. On New Pittsburgh, the remaining human colonists were watching the broadcast of the execution with tears in their eyes.
Oh.
Pete Williams, who had escaped capture by hiding in the deep caves, emerged to find Lisa Carter organizing the other survivors. Those boys died heroes, Lisa said, her voice choked with emotion.
Kate and Danny showed the whole galaxy what we are made of.
Pete looked up at the Zephyrian ships hanging in the sky above their planet. The alien vessels seemed to be having problems. Their running lights were flickering, and he could see small explosions on their hulls as systems overloaded. Something is happening to their ships, Pete observed. Jake must have done something before they caught him. Roger Hayes, the colony administrator who had betrayed the Morrison brothers, was hiding in his office. He had watched the execution. With growing horror, realizing that his cooperation with the aliens had not saved him, Commander Vextel had made it clear that all humans were considered potential threats. Hayes looked at his communication device, wondering if he should try to contact the other survivors and ask for forgiveness. But he knew there was no forgiveness for what he had done. He had betrayed 2 good men to save his own life, and now he would have to live with that choice. Back on Earth, the countdown continued. 7 minutes until the kinetic bombardment reached its targets. Dr. Murphy was monitoring the satellite systems, making final adjustments to ensure maximum accuracy. The virus is working better than we hoped, he reported. The Zephyrian ships are completely helpless. Their engines are offline, their weapons are dead, and their shields are down. What about civilian casualties? President Davis asked. The satellites are programmed to target only military vessels and installations, Admiral Sullivan assured her. We are not like them. We do not target innocent people.
Dr. Murphy highlighted different areas on his tactical display.
Wave will hit the command ship and the 2 destroyers. The second wave will target their ground installations and supply depots. The third wave will clean up any remaining military targets. President Davis thought about the Morrison brothers, about their final words of defiance in the face of death. They had shown the galaxy that humans could not be broken by fear or torture. Now it was time to show that humans could also strike back. What will happen to the Zephyrian Empire after this? She asked. Admiral Sullivan looked at the intelligence. Reports spread across his desk. They have been expanding aggressively for years, conquering weaker species through superior technology and fear. But they have never faced an enemy that could hit back across interstellar distances. This will change everything. The other alien species will see what happened here, Dr. Murphy added. They will realize that humanity is not as helpless as it appears. Some will think twice about attacking us. Others will want to ally with us. President Davis nodded. And the Zephyrians themselves. They will learn that there are consequences for murdering innocent people, Admiral Sullivan said grimly. Jake and Danny Morrison died to teach them that lesson. Tactical display showed that the tungsten rods were now halfway to their targets. In 4 more minutes, the Zephyrian fleet would face the full fury of human vengeance. The aliens had expected to terrorize humanity with their broadcast execution. Instead, they had awakened something they were not prepared to face. In the cold vacuum of space, dozens of tungsten rods continued their deadly journey toward the new Pittsburgh system. Each rod carried the kinetic energy of a small nuclear weapon, and there was nothing the crippled Zephyrian fleet could do to stop them. 8 minutes had passed since Jake and Danny Morrison died on live broadcast. 8 minutes since their final act of defiance had triggered a virus that was now spreading through every Zephyrian system in the new Pittsburgh sector, Commander. Vexel stood on the bridge of his command ship, watching his crew struggle with computers that no longer obeyed their commands. The aliens who had seemed so confident and powerful just minutes ago now looked confused and frightened. Their 3 eyes darted nervously between malfunctioning displays and sparking control panels. Status report, Bextel demanded, his metal voice cracking with frustration. All weapons systems are offline, Commander, reported his tactical officer. The virus has corrupted our targeting computers and disabled our energy cannons. We cannot even fire a single shot. What about the shields? Down to 12% and falling? The virus is draining power from all defensive systems. Vextel felt a cold fear creeping up his spine. In all his years of conquest, he had never faced an enemy that could turn his own technology against him. The humans had seemed so primitive, so helpless. How could they possess such advanced cyber warfare capabilities? Can we communicate with the other ships? He asked. Negative, Commander. The communication array is completely compromised. We are receiving false signals and corrupted data from across the fleet. On the destroyer Voidfang, Captain Zechtel was experiencing the same problems. His ship was dead in space, floating helplessly. While the virus ate through every system, emergency lights flickered as the main power grid began to fail. Captain, we are detecting multiple high-velocity objects approaching our position, called his sensor operator. Trajectory suggests they originated from beyond the system. What kind of objects? Unknown, sir. They are too small to be ships. But they are moving at incredible speed. Impact in 30 seconds. Zechtel tried to activate his ship's point defense systems, but nothing responded. The virus had turned his mighty warship into a floating piece of metal. All hands, brace for impact. The first tungsten rod struck the Voidfang at nearly 20% of light speed. The kinetic energy was beyond anything the Zephyrian shields could have handled even at full power. The destroyer simply ceased to exist, vaporized in a flash of light that could be seen from the planet's surface. Commander. Vextel watched in horror as one of his best ships disappeared from his tactical display. Before he could process what had happened, alarms began screaming throughout his own vessel. Multiple impacts incoming, shouted his tactical officer. 30 seconds to contact. Return fire. Launch everything we have. Sir, all weapons are offline. The virus has completely disabled our combat systems. Bextel realized with growing terror that he was about to die. The humans he had just executed had somehow arranged his destruction from beyond the grave. Their primitive species had hidden capabilities that his intelligence had never suspected. On the planet below, Pete Williams and Lisa Carter watched the sky light up with explosions. The Zephyrian ships that had dominated their world for weeks were burning and breaking apart. Chunks of alien metal fell like meteors, leaving bright trails across the atmosphere. "My God," whispered Lisa. "They are all being destroyed." Pete pointed to the largest explosion where the command ship had been. "That one was for Jake and Danny. The whole galaxy just saw what happens when you hurt our people." Other human colonists emerged from their hiding places to watch the spectacle. Children who had been afraid to go outside now stood in the open, pointing at the falling debris. The Zephyrian occupation was ending in fire and destruction. Roger Hayes watched from his office window as pieces of the command ship rained down around the colony. He knew that Commander Vextel was dead, along with all the aliens who had terrorized the human settlers. But he felt no joy, only shame. He had betrayed the Morrison brothers to these creatures, and now they were gone while he remained alive. In space, the kinetic bombardment continued with mechanical precision. The hidden satellites that Dr. Murphy had positioned throughout the system fired their tungsten rods in carefully timed waves. Each shot was calculated to hit a specific target with devastating accuracy. The second Zephyrian destroyer, Bloodseeker, managed to detect the incoming projectiles, but could do nothing to stop them. Captain Rexmore watched helplessly as 3 tungsten rods punched through a ship's hull like bullets through paper. The impact shattered the vessel's spine and set off secondary explosions that consumed the entire ship. "Hull breach in sections 4 through 12, screamed his damage control officer. "We are losing atmosphere. Engineering is gone." Captain Rexmore had just enough time to realize that the humans had been planning this revenge for years before. His ship exploded around him. On Earth, Dr. Murphy watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. Every red dot representing a Zephyrian vessel was disappearing one by one. The aliens had walked into a trap that had been decades in the making. Direct hits on all primary targets, he reported to President Davis and Admiral Sullivan. "The Zephyrian fleet has been completely destroyed." "What about their ground installations?" President Davis asked. "Being targeted now. Satellites are shifting to secondary targets, supply depots, communication arrays, landing platforms, everything that could support future Zephyrian operations." In the system, Admiral Sullivan studied the after-action reports coming in from their hidden sensors. Total enemy casualties. Preliminary estimate is over 12,000 Zephorian military personnel. Complete destruction of their fleet assets in the New Pittsburgh system. President Davis felt a mix of satisfaction and sadness. Justice had been served for Jake and Danny Morrison, but the cost had been enormous. Thousands of beings were dead, even if they were enemy soldiers who had participated in the occupation of human colonies. "Any survivors?" she asked. "A few escape pods were launched before the main impacts," Dr. Murphy replied. "But without their ships and equipment, they pose no threat. The local colonists can decide what to do with them." On the bridge of the command, Ship Commander Vextel had less than 10 seconds to live.
Ow!
Around him, his crew was screaming as they realized death was coming. The proud alien warrior who had tortured 2 human brothers on live broadcast was about to experience the consequences of his cruelty. In his final moments, Vextel understood something important about the species he had underestimated. Humans were not just individually brave like the Morrison brothers. They were collectively dangerous in ways the Zephyrian Empire had never imagined. They planned for revenge across years and struck back across impossible distances. The tungsten rod that killed Commander Vexthal struck the exact spot where Jake and Danny Morrison had died, the broadcast equipment that had transmitted there. Execution was vaporized along with the alien who had ordered their deaths. The symbolic justice was not planned by Dr. Murphy's targeting computers, but it was perfect nonetheless. Across the galaxy, Other alien species monitored the destruction. With growing alarm, the humans had seemed weak and divided, easy targets for conquest. But in 8 minutes, they had demonstrated a level of strategic planning and technological capability that no one had suspected. The age of easy human conquest was over. The Morrison brothers had died as heroes, but their deaths had awakened something in humanity that would change the balance of power throughout the galaxy. The smoke from the destroyed Zephyrian ships had not yet cleared when news of the battle began spreading across the galaxy. Every alien species with communication technology received reports of what had happened at New Pittsburgh. In 8 minutes, the human race had gone from appearing weak and helpless to demonstrating a level of strategic planning and destructive capability that shocked the civilized galaxy. On the Krellian homeworld, Supreme Chancellor Vorthok called an emergency meeting. Of his military council, the Krellians had been planning their own expansion into human space, believing the scattered human colonies would be easy targets for conquest. "How is this possible?" Vorthok demanded, his 4 arms gesturing at the tactical displays. "Our intelligence reports said humans possessed no weapons capable of interstellar strikes." General Kexron, his chief military advisor, studied the data with growing concern. "Chancellor, it appears the humans have been hiding their true capabilities for years. These kinetic bombardment satellites were positioned throughout their space long before the Zephyrian invasion began." "You mean they were prepared for this war? More than prepared, Chancellor? They were planning for it." The destruction of the Zephyrian fleet was not a desperate counterattack. It was a carefully orchestrated trap. Similar conversations were taking place on dozens of worlds across the galaxy. The Vaxery Collective, which had been quietly building fleets for their own expansion, suddenly found themselves reconsidering their plans. The hegemony of Sisk postponed military exercises that had been designed to test human defenses. Even the powerful Dominion of Zerth, which had conquered 17 species in the past century, began reviewing their intelligence estimates about human capabilities. If humans could destroy an entire Zephyrian fleet in minutes, what other surprises were they hiding? On New Pittsburgh, the surviving colonists worked to clear the debris from their streets. Pieces of Zephyrian ships had fallen like rain across the colony, but the humans had been careful to stay in shelters during the bombardment. No human lives were lost in the retaliation strike. Pete Williams organized teams to search for any surviving Zephyrian soldiers. They found 3 escape pods that had managed to launch before their ships were destroyed. Inside were 5 aliens, injured and terrified. The same creatures who had terrorized the colony just hours ago now looked at their human captives with fear and respect. "What should we do with them?" asked one of the colonists. Pete thought about Jake and Danny Morrison, about their final words of defiance. "We treat them fairly. That is what makes us different from them. But they will answer for their crimes. Against our people." Lisa Carter was treating the injured survivors in what remained of her medical center. The Zephyrian physiology was different from humans, but she had learned enough during the occupation to provide basic care. She listened to the aliens talking among themselves in their harsh language. "They keep saying something about unexpected capabilities and strategic deception," Lisa told Pete. "I think they finally understand that humans are not as primitive as they believed." Pete nodded. "Maybe that message will reach the rest of their empire." But the Zephyrian Empire was already learning that lesson in the most painful way possible. News of the fleet's destruction had reached their homeworld within hours. Emperor Zixthal, supreme ruler of 1,000 conquered worlds, found himself facing something he had never experienced in his long reign. A military defeat so complete that it challenged everything he believed about Zephyrian superiority. "How many ships did we lose?" the Emperor asked his trembling advisors. "The entire New Pittsburgh task force, Your Majesty. 3 capital ships, 12 destroyers, and 40 support vessels. Over 12,000 military personnel and human casualties. Civilians executed before the counterattack. No military losses reported." Emperor Zixthal felt a cold fear grip his hearts. His empire had suffered its worst military defeat in 5 centuries, and the enemy had lost only 2 people. Worse, those 2 people had somehow triggered the destruction of his fleet from beyond death. "Prepare a message to the human government," he ordered. "We will negotiate a withdrawal from their space, Your Majesty. Surely we can mount a counterattack with what?" the Emperor snapped. "If they can destroy our ships across interstellar distances, what makes you think they cannot reach our homeworld? Send the message." On Earth, President Linda Davis received the Zephyrian communication 3 days after the battle. Alien Emperor was offering to withdraw from all human colonies in exchange for a peace treaty. The message was carefully worded, but Davis could read the fear behind the formal language. "They are scared," Admiral Kate Sullivan observed. "They finally understand that humanity is not a primitive species they can push around." Dr. Alex Murphy was already working on plans for expanding the Righteous Fury system. "The other alien empires will be watching our response. If we appear weak now, they will try to test us. But if we show strength, they will think twice about attacking human colonies." President Davis considered the options carefully. The Morrison brothers had died to protect their home, and their sacrifice had changed the balance of power in the galaxy. She would not waste their gift. Send a reply to the Zephyrian Emperor, she decided. "We accept their withdrawal from human space, but we want reparations for the families affected by their occupation. And we want the officer who ordered the execution of the Morrison brothers to face trial for war crimes. Commander Vexthal is dead, Madam President. He was killed when his ship was destroyed. Then justice has already been served. But the galaxy needs to understand that there are consequences for harming human civilians." 3 months later, a memorial service was held on New Pittsburgh for Jake and Danny Morrison. Representatives from Earth attended, along with colonists from dozens of human settlements. The brothers had become symbols of human courage and determination. Throughout human space, Lisa Carter spoke at the ceremony, her words carried by broadcast to every human colony. Jake and Danny Morrison died defending their home, but they also died defending an idea. The idea that free people have the right to choose their own destiny. Their sacrifice reminded the galaxy that humanity will not bow to tyrants or submit to conquerors. Pete Williams unveiled the monument that had been built where the Morrison family home once stood. It was a simple stone structure with the brothers' names carved deep into the rock. Below their names was an inscription that would be remembered long after the last Zephyrian ship had left human space. They showed the galaxy that humanity does not break. We bend, we adapt, and we strike back. Their sacrifice lit the fire that burns in every human heart, the fire of freedom. As the ceremony ended, children from the colony placed flowers at the base of the monument. These were children who had hidden in caves and cellars during the Zephyrian occupation, children who had watched alien soldiers patrol their streets with weapons and fear. Now they played freely in the sunshine, protected by the knowledge that their people would never again be caught unprepared. The Righteous Fury satellites still hung in orbit around their world. Silent guardians watching over the colonies their creators had died to protect. In the years that followed, the destruction of the Zephyrian fleet at New Pittsburgh became known throughout the galaxy as the 8-Minute War. It was studied in alien military academies as an example of how a seemingly inferior enemy could achieve victory through superior planning and unexpected capabilities. But for the human colonists who lived through those dark days, it would always be remembered as something simpler and more personal. It was the day 2 brothers chose to die rather than surrender their freedom, and in doing so, showed the entire galaxy what it meant to be human. The fire of freedom that Jake and Danny Morrison lit with their sacrifice burned for generations, ensuring that no human colony would ever again face conquest alone,